do you think, obviously this is just another millennial podcast, do you think they're more common nowadays, or do you just think they're more widely known about? What do you reckon?
So yeah, this is quite an interesting question. And throughout so obviously the reason why Matt's talking to me about this is because I've suffered with one for about 7 years now. So I've done like a lot of educating of myself,
Mm,
which has included kind of like learning a bit about why people have issues around food and weight and body image. Um, and what I found really interesting is that obviously now in the modern age we're a lot more influenced by things like social media
mm,
and the news and just everybody's in everybody's lives all the time. But I also learned about like the biological aspect and how it's actually a sort of a mechanism that's inside you, and people call it like the caveman brain. So
mm,
like the reason why people find it so difficult once they get themselves into that hole or when they start restricting their food is because it sort of, for some people, will flick a switch in their brain. So like if you imagine back in prehistoric times
mm,
when you were a caveman, if like food was scarce, like if there was a famine, your brain would tell you, right, you need to keep moving and you can't spend time like eating these high caloric foods or like hunting for food. You just got to keep going until you find stuff, which is also why people often with restrictive eating disorders binge, because then when you find food, your brain goes, oh, quick, feast. I must replenish as much as I can because I don't know when the next time food is going to come.
mm,
Um, I think it's such like a basal mechanism that people don't necessarily understand. So they immediately link it to the sort of celebrity, body image, magazines, all of that kind of like influencer sort of stuff with like body ideals. So I think they do link, but I do think that there's people throughout history that have suffered with these things, but they just weren't known about. It didn't have a name. Like for
mm,
example, back in like the medieval ages, there would be like people who would give up food for God, and I
mm.
would say that that might be somehow linked to it as well. So I think it has gone on, and there's been lots of studies that happened sort of like a while back that you wouldn't be allowed to do now, that kind of show you how it's really easy for somebody to end up in that situation. And I think that quite a lot of people, if they've been through experiences where they've had to restrict their food, that they can accidentally get an eating disorder. Like
Mm,
it's so much more mental than it is like a physical or like a diet. It's so much more than that. It's quite complex. And obviously everyone has their own reasons and will be triggered by certain events. But I do think that there are a large contingent of people where there isn't really a trigger. It's just they had restricted for some period of time and it switched that like switch
mm.
in their brain. And that's kind of why they've ended up in a bit of a mess.